Greetings, everyone. It is 2 o'clock. We'll go ahead and get started with today's webinar. I am very excited that we have some of our most incredibly influential student leaders that are going to lead the conversation today. We actually have a pretty good group today. I think we'll be able to do individual introductions. It's a little bit smaller than what we normally have. So I'll go first. My name is Kristen Harper. I'm the Technical Assistance Coordinator for Transforming Youth Recovery. And this is Sydney. She's 4 months old. Smiling for you guys. The sitter canceled on me last minute, so she's going to participate as a attendee today. So please excuse the bottle, but I'm grateful that I'm able to do that with her. So we'll just kind of go around the room. I've got everybody that's in the room right now listed, and I'll just call on people's names. And if you would just introduce yourself, say what university you're with. You don't have to turn your webcam on. Just speak into the phone or into the computer, because I think it'd be helpful for everybody to kind of get to know each other as we move forward and continue to build our network. So Sarah Kaiser, I'll go ahead and call on you first. Go ahead and tell us where you are.
Okay, hi everyone. Good afternoon. Sarah Kaiser from Southern Connecticut State University in New Haven, Connecticut.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. I was just up in your area yesterday. I was in close to Greenwich in New York. So.
Oh, nice. Yes.
Beautiful area. And then we also have Samantha Wilhelmi. Did I slaughter your last name?
No, actually you did a really good job. So I'm Samantha. I'm the Alcohol and Other Drug Counselor at Radford University in Virginia.
Awesome. Thanks for attending today, Samantha.
Thank you.
We have a dear friend of mine up in North Carolina, Miss Mitzi. Mitzi, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, this is Mitzi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I am at Methodist University in North Carolina, and I do not work in this field, but I am very interested in supporting the process about collegiate recovery at this location. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And then we also have Lisa Peel. You said hey earlier, but go ahead and reintroduce yourself. Okay. Let's see. Lisa, are you there? All right, we'll come back to Lisa. How about Laura Sweets?
Hi, this is Laura Suits from East Stroudsburg University of Pennsylvania. I'm the coordinator of Wellness, Education, and Prevention.
Awesome. Thank you, Laura. I slaughtered your last name instead. My apologies.
Oh, no problem. No problem. It happens often.
Oh, well, we're glad that you're with us today. And we have Mr. Harris from East Carolina University. What's up?
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. This is Jay Harris. I'm the program coordinator for East Carolina University's Collegiate Recovery Community, and I'm also the Mid-Atlantic rep for ARHEs.
Yes, and you are a wonderful resource. So anybody that's in the Mid-Atlantic region that does not know Jay, then please let me know, and I'll connect you after the webinar. We also have Amy Gooch with us. Amy, you want to introduce yourself? Tell us where you're from.
Yeah, hopefully everybody can hear me. This is Amy Gooch. I'm a residence director at Colorado State University, and I work with the Collegiate Recovery Community, RAM Recovery.
Good job. Thank you so much, Amy.
Thanks, Kristen.
We have a visitor from England who's also joining us today, who's doing some really exciting stuff with recovery support services. Dot, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello everybody. I'm Dot Turton. I'm from Recovery Connections in the northeast of England, and we're aspiring to follow in your footsteps and help collegiate recovery begin, really, for the students in the northeast of England. We're trying really hard and we're starting to get somewhere, so thanks for the leadership, everyone.
Thanks, Dot. And Dot's had a pretty interesting trip over here in the U.S. over at Texas Tech, and maybe in the fall we can do another webinar and you can tell us what you learned and how you're implementing it over in England.
Yeah, we'd be more than happy to do that, and you know, I'm sure Abby's going to speak shortly, and you know, I look forward to the day that Abby announces herself as the Collegiate Recovery Coordinator. it'll happen.
Let's jump over to Abby then. Abby, where are you located?
Hello, I'm Abby. I'm also from the Northeast in England, the UK. Dot's my CEO, so I'm the Young People in Recovery Development Lead at Recovery Connections, and we're trying to make collegiate recovery a reality in the UK. So thank you for your shining example in the USA. Very excited about this webinar. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us today, Abby. We appreciate it. So we're going to go scoot over to my friends over in West Virginia. I think it's West Virginia. Nope, I'm sorry. Christy, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Hi, this is Christy, and I have one of our interns with us, and Rosemary, and we're at Western Carolina University in North Carolina.
Thanks, Christy. I appreciate that. I saw that W and I misread it, V after it. Glad you guys are here with us. We also have a couple more people. We have Charmaine Williams. Charmaine, where are you located?
I am actually in Charlotte, North Carolina at Central Piedmont Community College.
Nice. How's Tony doing?
Representing the grants office.
Okay, great. Good deal. We're enjoying working with you guys a lot.
Thank you.
Also have Amanda, and I don't have a last name in there. Amanda, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, sorry I joined a little late. Another meeting ran over, but this is Amanda Hoylman. I'm from Washington University in St. Louis, Missouri.
Awesome. Welcome, Amanda. Thanks for joining. So that's everybody that I have names for in the chat box. There's a couple that just say web or caller. So if I neglected to introduce you, please feel free to put your name and say hello within the chat box. I'll just go ahead and just do a couple quick reminders. As the presenters are talking, just keep your phone or your computer. Have exactly that issue. So if you don't know how to mute, I think somebody accidentally just mute. So that feedback happens when you have us on the phone and on a computer. There we go. So you can, within your system, press the little microphone button that will mute, and then, of course, the mute button on your phone also. Today is recorded. We're recording right now. We'll have comments and questions throughout this this awesome webinar. I'm going to hush in a second so we can get to it. So just make sure that you remember that whatever is put on the internet is there forever. So if it's recorded, then it will be there forever. And then also we have a few reminders at the end of the call that I'll go over. But basically the way the format will go is I'm going to introduce the speakers quickly and turn it over to them. If you have questions and you're just dying to ask, please use the chat box. We will stop throughout the presentations and make sure that we get your questions answered. And hopefully we'll have about 10 minutes. So about 2:50 Eastern time, we're going to stop the presentations and just open it up for discussion. So I'm really excited to introduce our presenters for today. I'm going to just kind of quickly remind you about TYR's mission and vision. Of course, we're here to support collegiate recovery and also recovery high schools and just youth recovery supports in general. The webinar goals have been basically to just get the best information out there as quickly as possible and make sure that we're constantly improving our quality of service. So today's webinar, the idea came about really from working with all of you guys, with our grantees, with ARHE, just interacting with some really amazing and dynamic recovery student leaders that have collaborated with staff or working with staff that actually haven't been able to locate recovery student leaders. So I thought maybe it would be a good idea to bring together a couple of the students that I've gotten to know over the years and let them talk to you about how they got involved, why they got involved, and kind of the steps to really secure that institutional support that's really important. So I'll go ahead and introduce our first speaker, Tim Rabolt. And many of you know Tim. He is currently working with the Association of Recovery in Higher Education. He oversees the event management, community relations, and strategic advancement. Prior to joining ARHE, Tim was also with Alterum. Before that, he was an intern for the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy and a graduate assistant for George Washington University Collegiate Recovery Program. He served on the board of directors for ARHE and is currently on the board for the Chris Atwood Foundation, the Amon Foundation. There's just a ton more stuff in his bio. I'll just tell you personally, he's one of my favorite people in the whole world. He's a sweet guy, brilliant. So I am going to turn it over to Tim, and then I will come back and introduce you to Lau. All right, Tim, take it away, buddy.
Perfect. Thanks, Kristen, and thanks for putting all this together. Also glad that you had me go first, so Lau couldn't set the bar too high. So yeah, glad to be here. So I wanted to start off just with some quick kind of background info about myself and about the program that we kind of put together at GW. As Kristen mentioned, I'm not there anymore. I started there in 2011 as an undergraduate, and then stayed for grad school, and just wrapped up a little less than a year ago in May. I also, before kind of diving into everything, wanted to, state and kind of not necessarily a disclaimer, but I think a lot of folks think that there's a recipe book for collegiate recovery, and especially with this topic, I know it can be tough. And what I'm going to talk about is really just our experience and what my experience was at GW here in the DC area. And I hope it's helpful, and you guys are able to kind of see like, oh, maybe this will work at our school, but you guys all work in higher education and understand that every school is different, every student's different. There's a lot of different paths to making it work. So yeah, I hope it's helpful, and then we can have some discussion towards the end. So I got into recovery actually in high school. I was in Wilmington, Delaware, which is right outside Philadelphia. And it was right towards the end of high school, and I remember coming down to DC for really like the first time as a GW student in June for orientation. And there was a kind of seminar about alcohol and drug use, and at this point I only had a few months into my kind of path of recovery, and I went up to two individuals who were staff members in the Division of Student Affairs, working with the health center and kind of the student judicial services. And I told them that I was in recovery, and I don't know if this was just kind of like early on ignorance, but I expected to be connected with like, hundreds of students who are in recovery. And that didn't really happen. There really wasn't the support services in place at GW, which is not, any kind of insult to GW. That's kind of the reality with most schools. And luckily what I found during my freshman year was a lot of other students who weren't connected yet, but were in recovery or trying to get on the path of recovery. So, that's kind of how things initially started. In fall 2011 is when I first enrolled as a freshman. Again, I was really early on in my recovery path, and connected with some other students who were in my residence hall, as well as some other students that those individuals that I talked about from the June orientation, they, were in connection and conversations with other students who were in a similar spot to me as far as being in early recovery. And so in February 2012, we had our first actual meeting together. I was actually just at the site where the building used to be. They knocked it down and put like a nice garden in, but it was kind of sad to see that building go. But anyway, that was the first time we all kind of came together, and it was a really interesting group. We had a student veteran, we had a couple of grad students, a few freshmen like myself, non-traditional students, and it was incredible to be in that room and talk about our journey and being in recovery and where we wanted this kind of group to go, and to know that everyone was in like such a different spot, maybe professionally or academically, but we all had that same kind of goal of being a student in recovery. So that's kind of how things got kick-started from the student-led perspective. So at that point, we started to refer to ourselves, as a student organization, even though we didn't get registered until the following year. And what it looked like really early on was just this kind of grassroots, not necessarily a movement, but just this kind of grassroots organization where we just had meetings every week, and we would go get Starbucks before, or go get something to eat after, or order some pizza that the school paid for. And early on we just kind of had basically our version of like a 12-step meeting, just to have some kind of consistency. And then if Kristen goes to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about what the student organization kind of turned into. So the next year we actually got registered as a student organization, and I'll focus on this a bit because, as Kristen and maybe some of you guys know, like this was really our catalyst, at least how it worked at GW, to kind of launch into what it turned into today. So like I mentioned, about a year later, we actually got registered as a student organization. And like a lot of other schools, there's certain requirements that a student organization had to have. One of which was, having a list of members that was kind of public to the rest of the school. And as you guys can, probably imagine, a lot of the folks in our group were really uncomfortable with that, from like a confidentiality, anonymity type of perspective. So they were really helpful in assisting us in navigating that process. And lo and behold, we got registered, and we're able to start kind of working with other student organizations, and it really turned into more than just this kind of informal support group. And we really started to see that this kind of ragtag group of students we put together, now it's a registered student organization. We got this sweet logo we put together. I always thought it was really clever to have the circle with the Pentagon in the middle, because AA had the triangle and NA had the square, and we're in DC, so might as well go with the Pentagon. So I always liked that we had a nice little logo. And what we started to do was more advocacy. And the reason we did this, looking back, maybe we should have focused more on support, but the group of students we had was really set on not just getting support for ourselves, but actually leading change within the university, so that when we were gone, in X amount of years, that there was pieces in place where other students who were coming into GW at the same time, we were, as like a freshman or a transfer student or a grad student, already had support services in place and didn't have to kind of fight the battles that we did. One of the things we realized pretty early on was that we were able to navigate, the kind of channels of a university easier than a department might be able to, sometimes for better, for worse. So we were able to, plan events and raise money and have a little bit less restrictions on how that money was used for different trips or different, activities on or off campus, in the DC area. And we started to do a lot of like fun stuff. Like we would go out and I remember this day trip we took out into Maryland and, did like a high ropes course. And, that was like one of the best memories I had like early on. Or, we took a trip up to Philadelphia for the Democratic National Convention. Like we did all sorts of, great stuff. And that, on the surface might have just seemed like, different activities and, things like that. But it was really like kind of bonding us together and really helping the organization grow into, something we really didn't see from those early stages. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so the GW administration is kind of where we started to see that, a student organization wasn't realistic long term as far as a sustainable way of supporting students in recovery, at GW in the long run. And so what we, started to do was, move away from just this kind of basic level of, having meetings, doing activities, and trying to work with the administration, mainly within the Division of Student Affairs, but also with some of the academic departments like the School of Public Health, to really kind of intertwine the principles like of recovery and a deeper understanding of recovery support services and why that's important to the university as a whole, into GW. So for those of you who aren't really familiar with GW, it's a private school like right in the heart of Washington, D.C. This picture is like almost misleading because it makes it look like we have a campus, but it's really just like right in the heart of the city. So most of our campus is city blocks. It's truly an urban school in that regard. I always think it's funny to think about, like, schools are very bureaucratic for the most part, and then we're in the heart of DC, so we just have this constant fight of trying to navigate all those different channels and get things done and get frustrated when things move slowly, things like that. But there was a lot of ways that we actually used it to our advantage. As Kristen mentioned, I had the opportunity to intern in the Office of National Drug Control Policy within the White House. We've had like 3 other students do the same thing, as well as interning, in the Department of Health and Human Services within SAMHSA and some other agencies. And what that did for us was, you know, as I mentioned earlier, every school is really different. And a lot of the values that the upper administration had at GW was, you know, kind of, you know, working within the culture of DC. So when we were able to say like, oh, we have these great internships at these different agencies, and we could kind of use that as leverage and get, you know, some of the staff from these agencies to come to campus and speak at our events or talk with administrators, that started to, tip the scales in our favor a bit, as far as the university understanding that we're not just a small student group that's kind of helping each other. We're really trying to do something long lasting and really impactful at the university. The second bullet point there, talking about connecting with members of Congress, we did the same, you know, sort of stuff. We had our kind of flagship event was called Recovery Day. We called it Raise High for Recovery Day. Raise High is the motto of GW, for better or for worse. But we had this like big event that we have in April. We just had it again last week, and it was a little bit less of an attendance than we've had in, you know, the past few years. But you know, the first couple, I mean, we had, you know, big turnout and fly people in, and had Senator Sheldon Whitehouse from Rhode Island and these different folks from the agencies. And so when we would invite like the dean of students and these associate deans of students and these different professors or staff members who are open about being in recovery, this all contributed to you know, the university understanding that this is important and they need to invest in it kind of in the long run. So that's why I talk about like the showing off recovery. We really wanted to make it you know, stand out and kind of be loud about it in order to, you know, kind of create that change on campus. So going back to my story a bit, senior year is where things pivoted a bit. So up until this point, I was in the business school and was set on working in sports business. And I remember it was probably around this time, however many years ago, where I kind of, you know, had this realization, you know, actually, I don't think I want to work in sports. I actually want to, you know, work in collegiate recovery, whether it's in DC or whether it's, you know, on some larger scale. And I remember calling our dear friend Sarah Nerad from Ohio State University and like almost breaking down on the phone one night, saying like, "What do I do? What do I do?" And she was like, "You know, follow your passion. Like if that's what you want to do, collegiate recovery, like it's not too late." And I joked that I kind of stayed for grad school at GW just to buy myself some more time so I could figure out how to make this work. So that senior year point was a pretty big pivot. And that was immediately after attending my first ARHE conference, which was in Minnesota at Augsburg University. So where we kind of went to the next level, you know, the Serenity Shack was our space on campus. It's a townhouse where we have the lower level, where it has a kitchen, bathroom, living room, and we use that as meeting space. And students who are in recovery that, you know, were involved and got approval from, you know, our contacts in the Division of Student Affairs had 24/7 access to this space, which was huge. A lot of universities might have, you know, more restrictions or, you know, a less favorable location on campus, but this was, you know, right where we wanted it, and it was a great asset to, you know, our group. I mentioned Recovery Day. We also won Student Organization of the Year, which really helped kind of get buy-in from the rest of the student body as far as allies. We got the Transforming Youth Recovery Grant a while ago. Must have been 2012 when we actually got it, and starting to get donations on top of that, right? From, you know, we did like a big crowdfunding thing. We got donations on site at these events, and I'll get into it on the next slide, but that really started to open the university's eyes even more so about, hey, this is something that, you know, the administration needs to buy into because they see the money coming in. And that last bullet point, which I'll also jump into, is like that's where it transitioned from this student recovery support effort as a student organization to actual program that's, you know, run by the university. So, you know, the long-term piece, and, you know, as I mentioned, I'm not actually at GW anymore, and even last year, I thought it was really important to take a step back and kind of let some of that growing pain set in for me, but also for the university. For a while, we had this like really core group of students that just like did everything, and we realized we couldn't just put this all on our back. It wasn't good for our recovery. It wasn't good for the long-term sustainability of the group. So I mentioned senior year is where we pivoted, and so senior year and then my first year of grad school, because I didn't take time off. That's where we really just focused on long-term buy-in, however we were going to do it. So we went. The university actually probably really wasn't happy with this, but I think hopefully now, maybe long-term they'll be happy. But we kind of just went rogue if we weren't getting through to the staff members we were working with. We started connecting with members of the board of trustees, right, or like really high up people, and we even at one point wrote a letter to the president of the university saying that there needs to be a staff member in place, because we had space. We were doing really well with housing accommodations. Obviously, the student organization was thriving. We started to see that it could change on campus, but we knew if there wasn't a staff member dedicated to it, it wasn't going to survive long term. So we wrote this letter. We got hundreds of signatures online. He spent 2 hours with us, and then had another follow-up meeting, which was amazing. I mean, you guys all work in higher ed. For a university president to spend that amount of time with a group of students is pretty significant. And so while we were doing all that kind of crazy stuff, there was also some of these other pieces on the slide right here that actually helped even more so, and they were kind of complementary. So obviously, the collegiate recovery research that we had access to was extremely persuasive in helping the university understand just how important a collegiate recovery program is. So the research from Dr. Leday on the national level, as well as more local or regional studies from different researchers, but we really focused on Leday's research. The student success metrics were really compelling for our administrators about students who are in collegiate recovery programs having higher GPAs, retention rates, graduation rates than their peers at the host institutions. They understood that. The life cycle of addiction, that was really interesting, and something I don't think it's talked about enough, but essentially that the students who are in collegiate recovery programs compared to an individual that's battling a substance use disorder, comparing the typical life cycle of addiction, that a student in the CRP is finding stable recovery by age 26 on average rather than age 41. That meant a lot to the university. One, because they see there's a benefit of seeing sober students on campus, because there's less cost to them, right? There's less crime or less time that they have to involve like judicial affairs or whatever other staff department would have to deal with an individual that's in active addiction. But also when someone's in recovery, that's almost the epitome of kind of what you want a typical student at your college to kind of resemble. So all the research was very helpful. As I mentioned, the funding was coming in, and that kind of opened the university's eyes to that. Okay, maybe there's a whole new untapped donor market that we can reach out to. And all of this kind of coupled together started to cement the role of collegiate recovery within student affairs, within the health center. They just hired their first staff member last week, and that's kind of what the student-led collegiate recovery efforts at GW looked like in terms of leaving our legacy. So that's kind of everything in a nutshell.
That's great, Tim. We have a couple of questions, and I'm going to take the next minute and a half to answer them really quickly. One question was specifically, and you can see in the chat box, about marketing, and I think also about student recruitment. How did you kind of get the word out to your fellow GW students to get them engaged as well and help kind of build the community out?
Yeah, so it was a lot of different ways. So we were trying to think, okay, if we're in the place of, we're in the footsteps or in the shoes rather of a student who's either in recovery or struggling and, at that place where they're actually trying to get help, where are they? Like, what are they doing? So social media was a huge piece for us. We were really active on Facebook and Twitter, and we actually probably had like half a dozen students find us through there. We also had a really good kind of referral process from the health center and student judicial services. So where students would come in and, you know, kind of be expecting to get like sanctions for some kind of drug or alcohol related issue, a lot of the times they'd be sent to come to our meetings. And they also just launched a program last year. It's almost like the equivalent of like the drug court concept, but you know, they're doing it at the university. So students are, you know, having the option to, you know, pursue recovery instead of serve out, you know, like a suspension. So it's a pretty, you know, kind of lucrative choice in that regard. And then it was a lot of just like kind of grassroots stuff, like working with other student organizations, doing these events, making sure we had like flyers put out, and like different advising departments knew about us. So yeah, there really wasn't one way. I mean, like we like to think like social media did like a really big part, but it was, you know, all these events got other people at the university to understand who we are. So it was really just kind of this big kind of variety of different things we were doing that kind of, you know, made up our marketing effort, I guess. So I hope that makes sense.
Yes, it did. Thank you so much. And if you have questions and you haven't entered in the chat box, that's fine. We're going to have the last 10 minutes of today's session just to speak to one another. So you can either put it in the chat box or just hang on to it for the next 20 minutes while we go through Lau's presentation. Tim, thank you so much. I am so excited to now introduce Lau Harrison. And Lau is a University of Tampa MBA student. He's also working on a master's in education. So, you know, he gets bored real easily, apparently, and decides to do double masters at the same time and start a collegiate recovery program. He has been a phenomenal leader down there. He's from Lagos, Nigeria. He has extensive work experience across various fields. I will say his reputation down there has just been fantastic to work with, and the proposal that they put together is one that I may have sent some of you. It's one of the best administrative proposals that I've ever seen. So I'm really excited to turn it over to Lau and listen to how their community is coming along. So I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you so much, Kristen. That was quite a nice introduction. I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to be here and share the UTRC story, which I think also runs parallel to my journey in recovery. And so, Christian, would you please go to the next couple of slides? I'm sorry. Right. And so for me, I got to graduate school at the University of Tampa, which is a private school in Tampa, Florida, in the fall of 2016. I'm also in recovery, and so coming to university for me for grad school was actually it was one of those sort of geographic solution type deals. For those who are familiar with that language, I had been struggling severely in my personal and professional life, and I figured that if I got back to school, maybe things will sort of straighten themselves out. And so I arrived at the University of Tampa on the 28th of August 2016, and the day after, I myself relapsed. And subsequent to that, I went through the roughest 3 months of my life. And a lot of that happened on the campus, right? A lot of what I was doing was on the campus, and so it wasn't a very safe space for me. And so coming into recovery, I kind of identified, and having gone through the conduct process as well, I kind of identified the fact that I needed another layer of accountability on campus, and I needed to connect with other students who were also in recovery. And so myself and the Associate Dean of Wellness at our university kind of got together, and she told me that she had this long-standing idea of putting a collegiate recovery community together. I didn't know anything about collegiate recovery on a national scale. I just knew that I needed something on that campus to help me stay sober. And so she and I put together some documentation. We did quite a fair bit of research on what some other universities were doing. It's at that point we started to discover that there was this national movement, and we put together a justification document that we sought to take to the administration to make a case for why this thing needs to be in place. And that was the point of departure for us. We put that document together. I think we circulated it to the Dean of Students and a couple other departments and got some positive feedback, and then just decided we were just going to go for it and see what happened. So I was one of two founding members. We had our first meeting on the 20th of January 2017. And the idea was simple. You know, we are in that relationship business and in the saving lives business. And, you know, because of what I was just going through, 2 or 3 months sober at the time, you know, it meant a lot to me to put in all I had. And that was how we started. You know, UTRC on the one hand likes to focus on, you know, the recovery component and offering this holistic approach and end-to-end recovery services for students on the UT campus. And then on the other end, we also focus a lot on the educational side, which is how can we kind of, I guess, as some others have put, how can we destigmatize substance use disorder on this campus and thus create a more healthy environment for our students as well on the campus. And that's the why of how UTRC came to be. Christian, would you please go to the next slide? And so today I'm going to put some emphasis on, I think, what I identified to be some of the strong drivers of our growth thus far. I think that there was a lot of emphasis put on, you know, putting this proposal together and things like that. And those things have definitely helped us out. But, you know, I think timing played such a critical factor. As I said before, the dean had been trying to put things together for a long time. And it all kind of just, it was the right mix of strong leadership and I think willingness on the part of the students as well. And so we are a student-driven initiative. I think, like Tim was saying, we are still in that development phase where we're transitioning from being a student organization to being a program. And a lot of how far we've come has been driven primarily by students. Kristen, if you would please go to the next slide. Sorry. So as I said before, this has been in the pipe for a really long time, but it all came together in the spring semester of 2017. University of Tampa Recovery Community, because it is a student organization, is also embedded within the holistic health initiative that the University of Tampa has for its students. It's called Live Well UT, and it's comprised of a ton of other student organizations and are led by, each organization is led by some pretty passionate students who care about nutrition and health and mental health and social justice issues. And so when we started, we thought it would be best if we would, you know, have that kind of be our springboard, if you will. And the reason why is because, you know, you have a ton of other student organizations doing things around holistic health, and you could piggyback off a lot of the activities and events that they had going on. And at the same time, we could also pilot anything that we were trying to roll out with those students as well. And because they're also highly active members of the university community, they also know quite a fair bit of people as well. And so it was very comfortable for us. It's been our home. We do not have full-time accommodation for students in recovery. We do have shared space on campus at the Wellness Center. And so a lot of our activities, our recovery meetings, etc., happen at the Wellness Center. And so a combination of that, working with the Dean of Wellness, who has had, again, this was sort of her idea. She just didn't have the right mix of students to kind of like drive this thing through. I think that all led to what eventually has become our organization. You know, we couldn't have planned this and, you know, better for it to have worked out the way that it has. So I would say that the timing played such a crucial element. In the past year, we've seen quite a fair bit of success. I think what started with just me as a student, you know, by I think maybe 3 or 4 months in, we had at one point about 12 or 13 students in the rooms. And so, you know, that for me was thoroughly exciting, being able to find all the students on campus who were in recovery, some who were exploring what recovery looked like to them. we hadn't sort of fine-tuned what that process looks like of onboarding new students because we were brand new, and a lot of the stuff we kind of learn on the go. But we sit now a lot more mature in our process with like systems in place, I think, of screening and making sure that the students are in the right frame of mind when coming in. And we also want to act as support, and we also make referrals to rehabs around the local area as well. In the past year, we've also put a ton of events together, and I think that's where a lot of our initial publicity came from. We did quite a fair bit of events on campus, and we did quite a fair bit of stuff off campus as well. And so that has helped significantly grow our organization. Next slide, please, Christian. The next slide, please. Sorry. I think my system's a little bit slow here. Right, so as I mentioned before, we had put together several documents. No, I meant the one before, I'm sorry, it's slow, so it's changing too slowly. As I mentioned before, we'd put together several justification documents that we sought to take to the university administration. And one of them was, is a part of that document is what I put on there. What it was, we kind of got together and identified what the things were that we wanted to put some focus on. We just allocated responsibility per student in helping getting those things accomplished, with Gina kind of spearheading being the champion of our organization. And so we had people who were responsible for things on the marketing side. We had people who were responsible for things on the fundraising side. We had people who were going into classrooms, engaging with students and explaining, doing presentations about who we were, what we did. We were interacting with other student organizations. We were interacting with the campus safety, TPD. I mean, we were basically getting in front of a ton of people. And so it was, twofold again. We were kind of like letting people know that this is who we are and this is what we do, and kind of opening our doors to anybody who might be in need. And that implementation, that strategy has served us very well. What we do is it's an iterative process. So, I mean, ultimately, wherever we are right now is still in line with what that roadmap we'd created in the get-go, from the get-go, sorry. And we just make reference to that document and figure out, okay, where are we and what do we need to do? We do have like a long-term 3 to 5 year plan. And I think that like we're right there with it. In so many areas, we've seen tremendous success, and in some areas, we're still struggling. But generally, we found this to be an incredibly helpful tool because we all hold each other accountable to this document, and we all kind of have this, great idea for what we're trying to go. And also, we tweak the document where we see we're not getting responses the way that are supposed to make sense. With some events, we kind of scaled back because we didn't get good feedback there, and in other ways, we've also modified that because we were seeing tremendous success in other areas. And so I would encourage you guys to put together any sort of roadmap if you're in the early days of your program, interacting. There's so many resources available with, and that's another thing I've come to find, interacting with other CRCs is very, very helpful. We've had a lot of help in preparing and putting together all the things that we have. We interface with the Association of Recovery of Higher Education, the rep for the Southeast, which is Blake Schneider. I'm sure a lot of you are aware who he is, and he's been a tremendous resource for us. And so, yes, this is the roadmap slide, and I think it is a great idea. The next slide, please, Christian. Collaboration. As I said earlier, and as I'm sure most of you are aware, we are in the relationship business, right? And so ultimately, it was important that other, different departments at the university kind of knew who we are, and they kind of had a good idea of the services we offered. We went to the medical center and we kind of let them know what we were doing. On the academic side, we met with professors as well. We really have come this far because of the emphasis we've placed on building good relationships with these different departments across the university. That diagram is not very clear, but kind of factored into our approaches. They're all relational plays. We know that we hope to, at one point, for example, we were trying to do some off-campus activities, and so we had to loop in some professor to come along and get involved and help us in doing that. As far as the conduct process, for example, we know that a fair amount of students go through that, and we all like to get our information in front of them so that when the students come in, they understand that there is a resource on campus towards them. TP, the campus safety as well, they have our cards, and so if they've come across students who, I guess, they might be interested, they're happy to leave our cards there too. And so we found collaboration just to be, a key piece of scaling this collegiate recovery community. Kristen, if you would please, the next slide. And I think this is kind of like the bread and the butter of how we've grown. The grassroots for us was, really a hands-on approach, going into every single dormitory and putting up flyers, interacting with these student organizations. Really nothing outside of what I've already said. I mean, we just were on the ground, and social media was a great help for us as well. We're expanding what that looks like currently. We just really identified that, we had to, get out there on the campus, let all the students know we were on the ground. I think being a part of Live Well has been incredibly helpful because, again, the students that we interact with, we have a meeting every Friday morning at 8:30, and it's at the University Fitness Center, but it's like 55, I think maybe 60 students who are all passionate about fitness and this and that. And every time we have an event we want to do, or it's an off-campus event, or we want to talk about, let's say it's our allied training piece, which is a new educational initiative that we're rolling out on the campus. That's kind of where we get it done. The next thing you know, they're retweeting things for us and they're telling their friends, and we get feedback like that. And so email campaign, the university sends out these blasts once a semester, every couple of times, and they could talk about your student organization. So we found that to be incredibly helpful, so that every single student, faculty, staff, adjunct gets that email, and they knew about, also they heard about us through that outlet, and we've got some feedback from that. The fly campaign, as I mentioned, we would go into dormitories, go everywhere really that we were allowed to, and put up flyers for about our organization, meeting cards, which would be the weekly programming piece. We right now are working on putting what we do on a weekly basis on the cards, and just handing them out. And we meet a couple of times a week. We have anonymous meetings on campus. We have meetings exclusively for our members as well. And then we do our off-campus events, which are tied back to the flyer campaign. From a financing standpoint, being in Live Well also helped provide quite a fair bit of breathing room for us. We also are a TYR grantee, and currently, and I'll talk about this on the next piece, which is the sustainability side of things. We are also trying to endow a position for a full staff member, just because I think that it's an uphill battle raising that money internally at the university, just because there are just so many other areas and so many other things, and resources are lacking a little bit. And so that's on the financing side, but I'll get to that shortly. On the cross-CRP collaboration, again, I found that to be incredibly helpful. A lot of the ideas that we've put in place and have implemented have not been ours. People have done some incredibly awesome things, and I guess these forums that we come on and kind of share ideas are great ways and great tools for, understanding ways and cherry picking things that you think might work on your campus, and being surprised about things you think wouldn't work and then actually do work. So we were at the ARHE conference in July. We were also at the skiathon as well. And in these mediums, we get quite a fair bit of information and always come back full circle and try to implement that when we get back to our campus. And as far as macro partnerships are concerned, I already mentioned TYR. I think we're also working with Brass Tacks as an organization, and right now we're figuring out how we could have them help us from a technical standpoint, kind of moving forward on the sustainability piece. Kristen, if you would please, the next slide. So kind of similar to what Tim mentioned as well, because we are a student-driven organization, an area of concern is the longevity and the sustainability. As I mentioned, we do not have a member of staff currently we kind of work with the dean and the associate dean and some other people who are paid by the university do help us where they can, but no one single dedicated staff. And so a big challenge for us has been trying to figure out how we go about doing that. And so kind of in line with our strategic roadmap, sustainability is important. And so we're figuring out how do the relationships we built from the get-go, how can they help foster long-term sustainability? And that's one piece. The other is how can we fully fund a position over the next 5 to 10 years, right? So the student organization keeps on going, and how can us kind of endow that position, utilizing resources outside of the university, further loan us credibility, kind of as what Tim shared as well, because I think we found that every time we're able to raise money externally, it kind of raises our credibility within the university as well, and kind of increases that administrative buy-in. And so long-term goal is one of which we're able to endow at least 50% of the position, and then kind of have this hybrid financing model where we also then raise the other 50% for that fully staffed position from the university. And so we're also working on the transition of leadership as well. I think the strategy that we had, kind of allocating roles to different students to get things done, is good because I think it prepares students for leadership. Obviously, we kind of create bucket lists of things we want to do as students and have each one kind of take ownership of that thing, whether it's an event, excuse me, or an initiative of some kind. And through that process, you kind of see the new leaders kind of take form. And currently, it's exactly what we're going through. We have some guy who has been working very hard, and I think he's going to kind of help steer the ship in that direction. And so it's important because, for example, I'm graduating in 3 weeks and then leaving the university. And so, the past semester has really been focused on how we can make sure this is sustainable and it keeps on going long after I've gone. And so we have a ton of ideas that we're still working through. And happy to share a lot of what those look like offline. But I think for the sake of time, I'm going to stop here. I'm sorry, I didn't even see that message. Sorry, Kristen.
Thank you. Don't apologize. Go ahead and mute for a second, Lau. So we'll go ahead and open up for questions now. We don't have any new questions in the chat box, but I have a question for both Tim and for Lau. If you guys would talk a little bit about how can university staff and the administration support passionate students that are engaged? What is the most basic kind of element that you found was the most helpful from staff? And Tim, we'll go to you first. Sorry, go ahead, Tim. I think.
Okay, now I'm muted.
Yep, sorry.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it's tough. So, yeah, there's a lot of answers running through my head. I mean, where I initially went was, just being there to actually listen and, not just hear what they're saying, but listen and, not let them completely call the shots by any means, but actually, understand that they probably do have a good bit of knowledge about the situation. I think it was frustrating for us when we had, upper level administration try and tell us how we should be in recovery almost. And it was like, well, you're actually not the students in recovery. So that was tough. But also, helping to open certain doors. Like when we got space, right? That was largely on the administrative side, as much as we can think we, did a great job advocating, it was largely that the university actually spent the time to identify different spaces and talk through the logistics and liability concerns of giving us access and, all that. So yeah, the answer would be, taking the time to listen, but also, opening the doors where you can.
Thanks, Tim. Lau, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so like I said, having Gina, who is the Associate Dean of Wellness, work with us from day one, kind of helped out tremendously. She's been at the school for, I think, maybe 15, 20 years. And before that, she was at Notre Dame and working within their wellness center there too. And so she was a champion for our cause. And so a lot of meetings we had, she would have called ahead and kind of straightened out the path already. We found people being extremely receptive to our message, and people being happy to help in whatever way they could. So far, I think the challenge has just been, I think, just like you find on any other university campus, there's, everybody wants to do a lot of things and there are only so many resources. And I think, the approach that we took was just one in which we weren't going to wait too much, at least from a financing standpoint, right? And then from an operational standpoint, whatever we've needed, we've been able to get from the administration. So I think the battle for us hasn't been too difficult. We've just kind of gone with the flow of things. Gina has been, again, instrumental to helping get us to where we are right now. And so not so many challenges spring to mind, I think, for me.
Thank you. That was very helpful. Everybody has been unmuted, so if anyone has a question and just wants to talk directly to us, then please go ahead and feel free to do so.
Hi, this is Sarah from Southern Connecticut. Tim, I just had a question for you when you were talking about the administration with, it was mostly that initiated that. How did that come about? How did they spearhead that, and what was the
Sorry, it was coming in and out. Could you repeat it again? I don't know if there was someone else too, but I got bits and pieces.
I don't know if that was mine. You had talked about the administration there being the one that was solely responsible to kind of get the space and look at all the logistics around space on campus. What got them to kind of move forward with that? Was that your voices? Yep. Was that what got them kind of motivated to start to do that?
So the actual space we got, it was the ground level of a townhouse, and our student organization advisor actually lived in the top part of the townhouse. So he was, he's in recovery himself. He was a big advocate for us. He also was really well in tune to navigating the different channels of the university. So, almost all credit should really go to him because he identified the space. He kind of, did his work behind the scenes and helped justify, why we needed space over, the countless other groups of students who said they also needed, their own space. Because there's always a fight for office space between student organizations, and obviously what we were going for was several tiers above that. So it really was, the combination of having the recovery champion, within the administration that also understood recovery and, was able to navigate the channels and justify to other members of the administration, why that was important for us to have access to a space like that.
Okay, great, thank you. And I just have a quick follow-up on a separate note about student recruitment. So I recently have been putting out a job description across campus to try to find a student in recovery who wants to help do outreach and kind of grow. And I'm getting a lot of responses, but all from students that aren't in recovery. And so I'm wondering if you have any suggestions about how to kind of maybe, find those students that would want to get involved, that are actually in recovery.
Yeah, well, and at least I can share our experience. We were a little spoiled because since we're right in DC, we already have so many meetings in place, whether it's 12-step or smart recovery or anything. So a lot of the students met each other there. So if there's meetings already in the community and you have anyone they know that could kind of not necessarily work the rooms, but that would be one place to start. And then if I'm put back in my shoes, back at GW, I would be talking to the staff members who are most likely to encounter students who are in recovery. So someone in the health center or in the judicial office that is working with students who might, or in the counseling center for students who might, for whatever reason, openly disclose without kind of breaking any, confidentiality things like that. They're in recovery and be open about it. That would really be it, unless there's anything else in the community, like a chapter of young people in recovery or some other student organization that might have, some kind of overlap with individuals in recovery. But yeah, it is tough to kind of find them.
Yeah, no, it's great. Thank you. I do have a few students that are really actively involved in their recovery programs, but are so busy that they're just, it's hard to take that on. So I was just curious, but thank you. I appreciate that feedback.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Thanks, Tim. Anybody else?
think I'll just come in if I may, just to give a little insight into the kind of quest that we're having in the UK, and I think, you know, finding that right person who's an ally of recovery is absolutely crucial. And I think, you know, Abby would agree with this. We've come across a few people who we thought would be the door openers that have kind of not been the door openers and have seemed to have gotten our way a little bit. And actually, for Teesside University, the person that is kind of the energy behind it at the moment is the person that we least expected it to. I just wondered if that was a similar experience for yourselves.
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. It's a good point, Dot. You never really know exactly what the level of support is until you actually ask somebody to take some action behind, not just talking about it, but actually kind of ponying up with some action behind it. So, Lau and Tim, do you guys have any experience of just kind of the political sort of environment with your universities, as far as sounds like, Tim, you may have encountered a few more barriers than Lau has experienced. But maybe just, you know, the university, we talk about it at TYR in our research, the endorsement versus institutionalization. So universities endorse these programs. They want to support their students. Absolutely. You know, put a website up, here's a computer. But when it comes to actually putting up the money and providing space, there's far less that actually do that. So if you guys want to discuss anything, we'll wrap up with that question.
So what is it specifically, just around like how to get them to move from endorsement to actual buy-in? Yeah, well, for us, it was really, you know, kind of all those different pieces we talked about that, you know, show, well, because, you know, most universities would probably say, like, okay, students in active addiction, really bad for our school. Students in recovery, pretty good for our school. And getting them to understand that, one, you're not dealing with just like a few students. You're really dealing with potentially like a really significant number of students. So kind of like a critical mass. So one, to get them to understand how many students are really talking about. So that's where the research came in. And then two, for them to understand that an actual collegiate recovery program would be, you know, transitioning students. Okay, you're going to have less students who are dealing with active addiction, more students who are in recovery, and then be able to show some of the data on just how much that benefits the school. I almost say it's, you know, establishing a collegiate recovery program is one of the simplest but smartest like business decisions a school can make, just because of what it does for all their success metrics and, you know, potential fundraising or cost savings. Like, it really does help the bottom line, and we have data to show that. So that was our experience. Like, if we just showed them really, you know, unequivocally that it's going to help the bottom line, that, you know, moved, you know, shifted this, tipped the scales in our favor in terms of moving from endorsement to actual buy-in.
Thank you so much, Tim. We are a little bit past the top of the hour. I want to thank everybody for attending. Please keep an eye out for a follow-up email with evaluations. We have 2 more webinars coming up. We have is there a difference between collegiate recovery at public universities and private universities? And that will be coming up April 26th. And then we have another one, our last one for this semester, we May 2nd, collaboration with public state offices. And we have some representatives from the state office in North Carolina that's going to chat with us about why collegiate recovery has taken such root in that state, and why they have found it to be such a great investment. Also, we wanted to plug the 9th annual Collegiate Recovery Conference and the 17th National Recovery Schools Conference in Houston in July of 9 through the 12th. So if you can go to that, the TYR funds will cover that. You're allowed to use the funds for travel if you have some left. And it really is going to be a phenomenal conference. Tim and the conference committee has been doing a great job putting together a killer lineup. So we're really excited. Hopefully we can get everybody out there. And we look forward to seeing you guys in the next time. And if you have any questions, please follow up. I will make sure to get that proposal out to you guys in the email with the evaluation. And as always, continue to help our students. We are very appreciative. Have a wonderful week, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.